Hello students, welcome to Royal Palace PU College Jamkhandi online classes. Dear students, today will be the chapter that is of PUC second year, Ecological Unit, chapter number 15, Biodiversity and Conservation. Dear students, we have already studied some introductory part of this chapter. In the introductory part, we studied about what is the meaning of biodiversity and what are its different types and wherein actually these organisms can be found. And today is the continuation of the next topic. That is, the previous one was explaining us about the introduction of biodiversity. Now, once again, in this topic, we will include some 3 subtopics which are connected to it. As I explained, as I mentioned in my previous video itself, that this chapter is a smaller one. This chapter includes so many examples. This chapter gives us some basic information about the numbers of organisms. So, as far as theory and NEET examinations are concerned, we need to be very specific. Why? Because this theory topic consists of some numbers of organisms here. So biology's NEET examination is nothing but remembering those numbers and remembering those etc. names. Okay, now considering that thing in the mind, today's topics are, I have added 3 topics here, subtopics in the main topic as 2. Global species diversity, patterns of biodiversity, and finally importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. So now students, let us study them one by one and try to understand them one by one. Now, in the first thing of explanation of the diversity, I told you that what do you mean by diversity? Diversity is nothing but the process of occurrence of wide variety of organisms throughout the planet Earth is called as the diversity. Diversity means varieties. Diversity means presence of these varieties. Diversity means presence of these varieties of the entire planet kingdom. When we attach a word called as species diversity, then we need to look into some words or some definitions. What actually is the meaning of species diversity? Is that, as I explained already in my previous video, but then also, we have got tremendous numbers of species. The species is the one which is having its own specific morphology, its own specific anatomy, its own specific physiological characteristics, and the one which, among intercoursing with the similar looking organism, produces the young ones which is also similar looking to it. So, which has got specific characteristics in its body. Very simple one. Now the question is that, sir, are these species are present only as a one organism or different organism? See, let us take an example of human beings. Human beings have got their own anatomy and their own morphology, and they have got restricted characteristics, which means that these kind of characteristics similar to or equivalent to these kind of characteristics, we cannot find them in some other organisms. That's why these are called as species and they are specific in it. So considering human beings, they have got a species name called as Homo sapiens. This is a biological name for the human beings. Likewise, if we consider human beings in this entire earth, are they present everywhere? Now the question is quite tough and question is quite easy. Quite easy in the sense because of the human nature, because of his mental intellectual properties, he can roam in a lot of places. But there are thousands of organisms lakhs together of organisms which are not at all thinking like humans, which though they have the characteristics of specificity, characteristics of their own, it is not possible for them to leave their places. So what am I trying to say here is, in the entire planet Earth, we do not see only one type of air condition, one type of temperature condition, one type of precipitation or rain condition, and even one type of soil condition. There are places which have these varieties, and that too in wide variety places. Wide variety places having wide variety temperature conditions. Wide variety places have got wide variety precipitation conditions and soil conditions, etc., etc. The mentioning point is only one thing, that in the entire planet Earth, we do not see one type of species which are present in only one place. Depending upon the species characteristics, depending upon the environmental characteristics, they got adapted to that particular atmosphere. We see camels in only summer conditions. If I say only summer condition, it will be a wrong concept actually. So if I say that the camels will be available only in those places where in which the temperature is high. Okay, now I can say about the deserts. Okay, in the deserts, the presence of camels takes place, right? These camels having their own big legs, lengthy legs, they have got their own adaptations to that atmosphere. We see rattlesnakes which are present only in these particular areas. So these organisms with respect to that highest temperature got adapted themselves to stay there in that place. Now humans cannot stay there. Humans have got their own modifications, a technical modification so that he can stay there. If a human feels that there is an increase in the temperature, he switches on the AC or the cooler or the fan. If he feels that there is a decrease in the temperature, then he uses sweaters to warm him up. But there are variety of organisms which are present in a wide variety of places. They are distributed. The word itself says that distribution of organisms in different places of Earth is called as species diversity. Now, to understand how many organisms are there, to understand what many organisms are present in different places, the concept is global, which is the planet Earth, species diversity. There is one place called as the society, you can say, or the union, you can say, and these union such as IUCM. Dear students, try to write down this particular word called as IUCM. IUCN means International Union of Conservation of Nature and the Natural Resources, or IUCN. I repeat the word, that International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, IUCN, which was established in 2004. And it made a survey of variety of organisms present in the planet Earth. Highly, it is impossible to count each and every one species, but with the help of so many scientists working in a botany field or in the zoology field, they made a count of several organisms and finally they came to one conclusion. And according to them, the total number of species considering animals and plants are around 1.5 million. The first statement says that according to IUCN, which means that International Union of Natural Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, established in 2004, according to them, the total number of organisms or the species connecting to plants and animals is about 1.5 million. Now, along with this, there is another scientist called as Robert May. The scientist's name is Robert May. And this scientist also studied on the distribution of different variety of species which are divided into the planet kingdom. And according to his scientific calculation, according to his more methodological calculation and according to his more accepted calculation, the total global species diversity is around, see, it is around 7 million. As far as 1.5 million value is concerned, this one we have already studied in our PUC first year, naming the topic called as the species diversity or biodiversity. Now, in that section also we studied about 1.4 to 1.5 million. Now, in this particular topic, we are going a little specific with respect to scientific calculations, and that too done by one of the scientists called as the Robert May. And according to this person, this scientist, he thinks that there are total of more than 7 million species which are present in this entire planet Earth. Of course, there are organisms which are not at all found yet. There are organisms with respect to plants, with respect to animals, and with respect to microorganisms. There are so many organisms where still we don't have any clue about. But we need to understand what is the specificity about it and what are the examples and what are the general results of this particular Robert May experiment. Now, according to him, what he says that around 70% of, try to write down all these things, these are all names and numbers, we need to remember them. This is a general thing that we should be remembering it. Around 70% of all the species are animals. Wild plants carry about 22% of the entire section of 7 million. So out of 7 million, around 70% of the species are of animals only, and the rest portion is about 22%. Someone asks a question that, sir, 70 plus 22 becomes 92, what about rest 8%? Rest 8% you can think about microorganisms, or you can say that these organisms are not yet discovered. Okay, now coming to the next point, that amongst the animals, insects play an important role. This is very much important. Mark this as a neat example or neat important question or a point. See, out of 7 million, which organisms have got highest position? And the answer is the animals. Now, out of animals, which organisms have got the highest position or the highest organism or species level? The answer is insects. Insects comprise more than 70% of the 70% of 7 million. Okay, now here the understanding, once again I am telling you that 70% of the 70% of animals of the 7 million total species we need to consider about. Then, which clearly a funny thing, that in every 10 animals on this planet, 7 are insects on this earth. Right? So India has only 2.4% of the world's land area and 8.1% of the global species diversity. Okay, now there are nearly 45,000 of plants and twice as many as animals. Once again, students, there is nothing to explain in this topic. This is just a remembrance word, or this is just the mentioning names or the datas. We need to remember about the datas. So out of this particular line or the topic, let me tell you one thing, that global species diversity is nothing but distribution of variety of species or different types of species which are divided and distributed in the planet Earth. Now, we actually don't know, are they all situated in the polar regions or in the icy regions? Are they all situated in the desert regions or in the higher temperature regions? Are they all situated in the higher precipitation regions or some green forest conditions? We seriously don't know, but the Robert May, before Robert May, there is one institute or a company called as IUCM, which means that International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, which was established in 2004, says that approximately more than 1.5 million species are present. But a more scientifically specific answer was given by a scientist called as Robert May. And according to Robert May, they say that in the entire planet Earth, there will be more than 7 million organisms. He might consider even those which discovered, those which are not discovered. He might have added both the organisms in this. That's why it is becoming 7 million. Now, the next explanation goes that out of this 7 million, the consideration goes to plants and animals, and out of these plants and animals, the highest number of species are found in the animals and the lowest number of species are found in plants. In case of animals, 70% occupy the 7 million and 22% is occupied by the plants. Dear students, let me repeat it again. Still, there should be the discovery of different species of animals is required, and there should be the discovery of different species of plants is also required. And still, there is a discovery and the prohibition of the variety of microorganism is also taking place. One about inhibition, another one about prohibition, and something is about execution. All these things are coming in case of microorganisms because sometimes they are harmful and sometimes they are dangerous, sometimes they are useful. Right? It just goes with respect to the variety of microorganism the scientist is dealing with. Now, out of this 70% of animals, who or which organisms carry the highest position? Once again, the same question, that the insects play a major role. The population of insects, wide variety of insects are present, which carry once again 70% of animals of the 7 million total species which are present on it. And out of this, they say that out of 10 animals, if we see, there will be 7 which are insects, which are found in planet Earth. Now, in case of India, India has got the 2.4% of world's land area and 8.1% of global species diversity. There are nearly 45,000 plants and twice as many as animals we can find it. A simple thing, a data entry remembering thing. Okay. Coming to the next topic called as the patterns of biodiversity. What are the different varieties of biodiversity that we will be seeing? On what basis the biodiversity, on what basis the organisms are divided, on what characteristics are the plants and animals got divided. The topic is patterns of biodiversity. The first point says that biodiversity is not uniform throughout the world because it is affected by two factors. First thing, it is latitudinal gradients, and second one is species area relationship. We'll be studying about latitudinal gradient, and after that we'll study about species area relationship. Latitudinal gradient means it is the distribution of organisms depending upon the regions. It is not quite clear sentence, right? I'm also thinking that just because of a region, if I say just because of a region, if it is distributing, it is not a quite easier line to understand. Now, observe this diagram here. Observe this photo. This photo is a clear-cut understanding. It is divided into 3 sections, dear students. The middle one called as the Tropics. Can you see this one? Yes. The middle one is called as Tropics. And after, above the Tropics and below the Tropics, there is another region called as Temperate Zone. I think you can see here. Temperate Zone, Temperate Zone. And above and below the Temperate Zone, once again we see polar regions. Right, students? It is quite to understand, quite needed to understand that this globe appearance and dividing it into the latitudes. We call them as Akshamshagalu, Rekhamshagalu in Kannada. We call the words such as longitudinals and latitudinals. Akshamshagalu mattu Rekhamshagalu. Now this globe has got divisions with respect to latitudes, and these latitudes divide the globe into 3 sectors. One as the center portion. They called that center portion as the tropical region or the equator region. Okay, I repeat, out of the globe they divided into 3 sections. The first one is the center portion called as the tropic region or the equator region. Now in the equator region, if you observe it, if you go a little higher and a little lower, you see another region called as temperate region and a temperate region. Let me repeat it again. First thing is about tropical region or the equator, the central region. Above and below to it, there is another region called as the temperate region or the temperate region. Now, above the temperate region and below the temperate region, there is another region called as polar region and polar region. Okay, now try to observe my sentences very neatly, my dear students. That the sunlight's concentration is high, is more, is heavy at the middle of the equator region or the tropics region. The concentration of sunlight decreases if you move from tropic to temperate, and then temperate to polar, temperate to polar. I repeat it again. If this is the place or the planet Earth and it is receiving the signals from the sun, sunlight will be higher in the center position. If you go from center towards the upper region or center towards the lower region, which means that equator to the polar, right? So in the equator region, the concentration of sunlight is more. If you move towards from equator to polar, the concentration of sun decreases. So which means that the polar regions have got less concentration of sunlight and the highest concentration of sunlight will be at the equator, the middle portion. The ends of the globe receive less amounts of sunlight. Now, the reason of explanation. First point is that you just have to underline it and remember it, that the variety of species or the biodiversity will be higher in the central region. Okay, let me repeat. The distribution or the presence of variety of organisms will be higher in the middle region or in the equator region. And if you go from equator to temperate region, the concentration of species diversity decreases. From equator to temperate regions, the concentration of species decreases. And from temperate to polar, the concentration of species diversity decreases. Simple words, species diversity is high in equator region and it starts decreasing when it moves towards the polar region. Right, sir? This is the basic need, the basic thing that I had to tell you. So, biodiversity increases from polar to equators, that is from high to low latitude. Right? So tropics such as the degrees, try to write these down, 23.5 degree north and 23.5 degree south have more species than the temperate or the polar regions. Right, students, we need to understand some examples. First thing is that about this one. Colombia located near the equator. Equator, the center portion. Observe this diagram, students. This one, the blue color one. Okay. Colombia, which is actually present here, which is present in this center portion. Colombia. According to the scientists' explanation, they say that the middle portion, such as Colombia, occupies variety of highest number of species diversity organisms. So 1400. Mark all these lines and write down these lines. Remember these lines, by heart these words. Okay, 1400 species of birds. New York. Here you can find this one, the second diagram, the second photo. Here you can find the New York, which is towards a temperate region. The New York has got 105 species. And if you go to Greenland, if you see the globe like this is the third diagram. In this diagram, this is the red color thing, this is called as Greenland, which is completely present at the polar region, has got only 56 species. Okay, it is quite to see here that I have given 3 examples with 3 different places. Out of the globe, one which is present at the equator region called as the Colombia, another one in the temperate region called as the New York, and the third one which is completely present in the polar region called as Greenland. We see high number of species in the Colombia, high number of species in the New York, and least number of species in the Greenland, which clearly indicates that the equator region has got high species diversity, and lesser to that is the temperature region, and lesser to that is the polar region. Now there is another thing which is present in the Colombia region only, called as the tropical rainforests of Amazon in the South America, possess the greatest biodiversity on earth. All these lines are to be lined, remembered and by hearted. 40,000 species of plants are there, 3,000 species of fishes, 1,300 birds, 427 mammals, 427 amphibians, 378 reptiles, and more than 1,25,000 invertebrates. See, all these are data which were calculated before 10 or 15 years. Right? If you consider these data as this time, once again these numbers will decrease because of the population and the extinction of the organisms. These numbers are very needed. These numbers are essential. These numbers have been asked in the examinations. So it is the content which is to be remembered and by hearted. So once again I am telling you that the Amazon rainforest has got the variety of organisms present in it. Out of that, 40,000 species of plants, 3,000 fishes, 1,300 birds, 427 mammals, 427 amphibians, 378 reptiles, and 1,25,000 more than the invertebrates. All these values are data. Once again I am repeating it. Okay students, so coming to the next section, observing the same diagram, in the between, in center, we see the first one called as tropical region, temperate region, and then polar region. This is the lowest number of organisms, and this is a little more than the polar, and high number of organisms are present in the tropical zone. Done. Coming to next point called as species area relationship. Now, this is quite easier to understand and quite complex to understand once again. How actually are you saying like this, sir? See, there was one scientist and he was from Germany. Okay, now Germany. And this German scientist who was a geographer, and his name was Alexander von Humboldt. The name is Alexander von Humboldt. This scientist worked on the different distribution of organisms in the planet Earth. Now he says something. Consider this is one area, and this entire area is not at all researched yet. This entire area is still unexplored. You are at the center of this particular area. Now in the beginning you feel and you think that there are very less number of organisms. It may be plants or it may be animals. It may be resources, it may be habitat, it may be water, it may be anything. Since you are at the center of it, since the entire area is not at all explored yet, and since you are seeing only the organisms which are present here, you feel that the organisms are very less. But, if this person or if this organism starts moving to this side, it means that this side of the area is being explored. Now once again, if he comes to this side of the area being explored. If he comes to here, he will be finding that this area is explored. So whenever he sees the explored area, in the beginning it was nothing. So when he searches and researches, when he explores the area, then he finds out that there will be different plants, there will be different animals, there will be different microorganisms, there will be different resources, there will be good amount of food to eat, there will be plenty amount of water which is present here. What the scientist is trying to say here is, the more you explore the area, the more you find out the species which are widely distributed. Since you did not explore the area, the organisms will be lesser only. The more you explore, the more you find about. But this hand also got its own limitation, its own area, right? So the entire earth is not a plain highway, right? There will be wear and tears, there will be uppers and lowers, there will be roughs and tides, there will be variety of edges, variety of bumps we see, right? So variety of places having different boundary conditions. So it has got its own limitation, and in this limitation, if the organism tries to explore, it finds out different species areas and different species diversity. Done? Very easy thing. So he says that the within a region, species richness, that is the increase in the number of organisms, increases with the increased explored area, but up to a limit. As I told you, the relationship between species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa appears as a rectangular hyperbola. This is one of the diagram that we will be studying in our theory and we will be studying in our NEET examinations also. It has been asked once that if you plot a graph wherein which the points are area versus the species richness. So now you observe this diagram. Dear students, the diagram is here. This diagram, see, the first x direction was about area and here it is species richness. The point says that as you explore the area, the number of organisms or species diversity increases, but it has got its own limitations. So when you plot this, you'll get a graph. When you plot this, you'll get a graph. This is area and this is species richness. Okay, when you plot this, you'll get a hyperbola, which is a clear indication that as you increase in the area exploration, you'll be seeing that there is an increase in the number of species. I hope you are getting it, students. Okay, it is a hyperbola and the graph is plotted against area versus species relationship. When you do that, you'll get an equation. Okay, and that equation is log S is equal to log C plus Z log A. There is no need to derive this formula. This is just a general statement. This chapter is completely based on remembering the words and names. Okay, where is the S is species richness, and at the same time A is area and Z is the slope of the line. Now there will be two things we need to remember. The value of Z, it generally gets a word or the value called as 0.1 to 0.2, which is very negligible because it is present with respect to the multiplication of log A, which is very less. Okay. Now this means that the value of Z means the slope of the line, regression coefficient. Okay. As the area increases, its popularity, its publicity, its number of organisms will also increase. That is the statement. But it has got its own limitations, and that is 0.1 to 0.2. But in some of the cases, such as the entire bigger, larger area, it gets some values such as 0.6 to 1.2. We just have to remember this much. Okay, 0.6 to 1.2. So the first point was about latitudinal gradients and the second point was about the species area relationship. The species area relationship will be as the area will be explored, the number of organisms will also be more. There will be a graph which is area opposite to species richness and it gives a hyperbolic answer. There will be a formula called as log S is equal to log C plus Z log A. S is equal to species richness and A is the area, wherein which Z is the slope of the line and Y is the intercept. Okay. Now we'll end this one here only and we'll enter into next concept called as the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. Actually, ecosystem comprises us, ecosystem comprises the nature, ecosystem comprises the species. If there are species, it means that it is because of the good ecosystem. If there are humans, it means that there is a presence of an ecosystem. It means that there is a presence of air, it means that there is a presence of water, it means that there is a presence of temperature, it means that all those possible favorable and unfavorable atmospheric conditions. There are organisms which are dependent, there are organisms which are independent, there are organisms which produce their own food, there are organisms which are economically important, there are organisms which are the green structures, there are organisms which create the oxygen, there are organisms, there is no need of breathing of oxygen, there are so many rich sources of vegetation which is present in our entire earth. And depending upon that, there are organisms which are dependent on these green structures too. Water, temperature, soil, biotic, abiotic, all these are interconnected. All these are once again will be imbalanced if something will be out of the task, if something will be out of the race, if something will not participate. So in reality, that species diversity is completely connected to ecosystem, and it indicates the richness of ecosystem. And if the ecosystem is rich, it indicates that there is a wide distribution of species present in that area. And if that ecosystem is weak, which means that there will be less concentration of species in that area. A simple thing to understand. Okay, now ecologists believe that communities with more species tend to be more stable. Very good thing. And this was confirmed by a scientist called as David Tillman. He was a scientist, and according to this scientist, he gives a word called as stable community. What is the meaning of community? Community is nothing but it is the one which contains different number of species in it. If you consider one species, it is not at all a community. If you consider two species, then only we can enter into a word called as community. There shouldn't be only two species also. Wide variety of different sections of species should be there. Then only their species will communicate into the population, and the group of population will give us the community. And which means that we are animals and we are dependent on other animals, and those animals are also dependent on some other organisms, and those organisms are also dependent on another organisms. It is like a chain of reaction which will be connected to one another. Okay, now which is considered as a strong community, which is considered as a stable community, which is considered as an able community, which is considered as the most affordable and favorable community. Okay, so let us understand their characteristics. First one, the productivity should not vary too much from year to year. Consider there is a family and there will be father, mother and two children. Now, if we say that is a stable community, it means that each and every time wherever the father goes, he should have to bring such good resources to his wife and to their children. The children will never suffer any kind of lack of food, lack of water and lack of resources. The wife will be happy and even the children will be happy until and unless only if the father brings all those resources to the home. Okay, but considering that wife is not at all working and only the husband is working, in any of the cases husband gets sick, husband gets ill. Now what happens? Now this family will be under threat, this family will be under tension, this family will be under deep sadness that the person who was bringing the resources is not at all capable of doing it. Now this family is not considered as a stable community. This family does not give much productivity in his absence. Now what to do? Consider his family is connected to another family and that family is of his brothers. Now instead of his absence, his brother can provide those resources to his family. Now during this what happens, since his brother is capable of giving that much of resources to this family, this total family is called as a stable community, a rich community. And if these two are not at all once again ill, they are in the ill condition or not at all possible to survive those particular situations, there will be another person who is once again connected to the family who will take care of these two families. What am I trying to say here is that if a more number of responsible hands are present in the family, then that family is a productive family, then that family is a stable family. Likewise, in the community, in the ecosystem also, if a variety of species diversity is present, then the productivity need not to be taken as a serious matter, because if you are not producing, then another organism will produce. That organism is not producing, then another organism will produce, which means that that community will get a stable nature. Okay, now coming to the next point, it should be resistant to occasional natural and man-made disturbances. Okay, since that family is strong, if some thunder comes, that family need not to be worried. If some strike comes, that family need not to be worried. If some flood comes, that family need not to be worried. If some other natural disaster comes, then also that family need not be worried, because that family is mixed up with the different species which are independent and having the stable nature. Now coming to the third point, called here as should be registered to invasions by the species, which means that since the family is strong, there will be other people who can threaten our family. If our family is strong, then no one will come to our family and threaten us, right? It is a common thing. I'm just connecting to the family, human family here. You can understand it in this way. Now, last but not the least, there was another scientist called as Paul Ehrlich. I repeat the word Paul Ehrlich. He explains the species diversity importance with respect to a rivet popper hypothesis. It is very easy to understand, very interesting to understand. Now consider there is an aeroplane. In this aeroplane there are passengers. Okay, one aeroplane and there are passengers. Now the aeroplane with the passenger has got their own limitations of access, their own resources to access, and their own registrations to access. Now these passengers with the aeroplane constitutes an ecosystem. Done, sir? Ecosystem. Now let us imagine one passenger stands up. He opens one of the nut. It is also called as the rivet. He opens up one of the nut of that aeroplane and goes away. Okay, one aeroplane filled with the passengers, and one passenger stands up and he takes up one rivet or one nut and he goes away. So in the beginning, to that ecosystem, nothing will happen. Why? Because only one passenger left and only one rivet has been opened. There will not be much danger to that particular aeroplane because only one nut gone. What can happen to that particular aeroplane here? A simple thing. But in the beginning, nothing will happen. Imagine that there will be another passenger who once again stands up, takes up another rivet and goes away. Third one takes up and goes away. Fourth one takes up and goes away. Like that, there will be so many passengers doing like this only. Okay, when there was a deletion or the removal of only one nut, nothing had happened to that particular community, nothing had happened to that particular ecosystem. Considering that passenger as the one of the species. But as the species richness started decreasing as the number of passengers started moving out of the plane, then this particular plane becomes dangerously weak. Why? Because that ecosystem completely dependent on the species, and if the species are not there, it is a common thing that the value of ecosystem decreases, productivity of ecosystem decreases. If the organisms are not there, then there will be no value to the ecosystem. So if the passengers are taking that particular rivet, popping up and going away, which means that there will be no productivity, there will be no organisms which can result into productivity, the organisms are living up at any cost. This particular sentence exhibition is designed and given by Paul Ehrlich to explain the importance of species diversity. Dear students, this happens in the ecosystem to be and the aeroplane, and the species to be the rivets, all parts together. If every passenger pops up a rivet to take home, resulting in the species extinction, it may not affect the flight safety initially in the beginning. But with the time, as more rivets are removed, the plane becomes dangerously weak. Very important to understand this, and very easy to understand too. Okay, so this is the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. Dear students, I hope you understood this particular topic, and I hope you are studying very well. This is the third chapter of the unit number 5, that is ecology. So once again, I'll meet you in the next video, that is a promise. I'll definitely bring another video, that is a promise. Until that time, be steady, be safe and be healthy. Till that time, see you. Bye-bye.